Well, I'm just back from a trip to Uganda. A couple of days ago, I got back. Thank you for those of you that prayed for me. The scariest moment of the trip was flying over Iran to get there. You know, I'm kind of looking down going, all right, I hope we get there. So we did. Great trip. Uganda is a fantastic country. I went there to explore partnerships with the vineyard there. There's a growing group of vineyard churches that was just completely inspiring. Great leaders, and just God's doing some wonderful things in Uganda. I want to show you a couple of pictures. This is a picture of a guy named Edward Semengo, and he is the leader of the vineyard churches in Uganda, kind of the main guy. He planted a church and then turned it over to somebody else, and now he's planted a second church. I'm going to show you a picture of this second church that he planted. They meet in a circus tent, okay, that he got over here. A circus tent company donated it to him, gave it to him. He shipped it to Uganda. It's this big tent. That's where they meet. That's their church. He's like, people love coming to tents, circus tents. He's like, great, so it's like you can't miss it when you're driving down the road. You know where the Vineyard Church is. It's the circus tent, okay? So fantastic service. I mean, their worship is incredible. I mean, they have dancers. They get down. They don't just stand and sing passively, okay? They get into it. They worship passionately. I don't just want to describe it to you. I want to show you a little bit of it. Can we roll that tape? For it. So that guy, his name is Jeff. Yeah, they get down, right? So that guy, Jeff, he's one of the worship leaders, right? And I talked to him afterward. I was like, Jeff, where does that come from? Talk to me about your worship. And he's like, when I reflect on where God brought me from, I can't help but move my body, right? I mean, it's just like, wow. Okay, we went to a school. There are multiple schools, but one of them is in a slum. Okay, so Edward started this school. He lived in the slum to start this school. Kids without any access to education. If he's not providing the school, they're not just going down to their local elementary school and that's paid for by the state. No, they're not getting educated if the vineyard isn't educating. So he starts a Christian school. I want to show you a picture of the school with some of the students there. Just amazing place. These are kids with their parents. Their home lives are a mess. Their parents are drug addicts and prostitutes, and they're living in just a shack, just pieces of wood clapped together right in the midst of this area. They're all squatters, even the school. It's the school a few years ago, the government came in with a bulldozer and was going to bulldoze all of it down. And Edward is praying. They're praying that the school, they wouldn't lose the school. And the bulldozer broke down right at the wall of the school. And the government kind of gave up and never, So the kids led worship services, okay, for us, and I want to show you just a glimpse of kids. This is student-led worship right here. Let's roll that clip. Yeah. One of the things that I was struck with was the joy in these kids' lives. These kids that, materially speaking, don't have much, okay? But I want to show you just a picture of when they warmed up to me. This is what they were like. I mean, they just were so filled with joy. They're ready to have fun. They're just amazing, amazing kids. I want to show you one other picture that I went out to a church with a mud wall kind of hut. That's a Vineyard Church out in the kind of the country. The guy that my arm's around, his name is Thomas Oyundo. He's a Vineyard pastor. He's been pastoring there for 18 years. He started a school, mud wall school. And one of the things that like he wants, we talked about wells and drilling water and stuff because those kids have to carry these things, right? These are what everybody uses in Uganda. You go, it might be several miles away. For him, it's about 5 miles away to the closest well that's free. There's ones that cost money that are closer, but they're expensive. And so they do this long, long walk carrying. Can you imagine how much this weighs full of water? I mean, people put it on their head. They carry it like this, right? If you're really talented, you can carry it without hands on your head, but not everybody can do that. But they also, if you have a bike, they strap like 4 of these onto a bike and just walk with it but it's really difficult to get water. So there's so much opportunity for us to partner with what the Vineyard is doing, to come alongside church plants that are growing, they're developing. And so you're going to hear more about this when this coming Thanksgiving, we're going to do another Compassion into Action offering, and this will be just part of it. We're funding the Hope Center through what we did last year. This year, we're going to continue to do some stuff here around us, but I also want to add into some stuff for Uganda, doing some water projects, because God is doing amazing things over there. I'm excited about it. So you're going to hear lots more about Uganda in the coming years, I suspect, because I think that God is leading us to partner with the Vineyard there and to do some good and seeing His kingdom advance. Okay, we are in the book of Mark. We're in the book of Mark, and I want to give a little caveat here this morning that the text that we're looking at today is the crucifixion text. And so this is, not exactly the most family-friendly part of the New Testament, okay? So maybe if you have kids, we got an amazing kids ministry. If you have kids that might be freaked out by some of the stuff that happens to Jesus in the crucifixion, but we're gonna talk about that a little bit. So just a little bit of a warning of that. But this is, sometimes I think that We've turned Christian faith into something that is sort of a nice polished smile and little doilies and little magnets on our fridge and all that. But a text like this that we're going to look at about Jesus being crucified it just gives us this glimpse of like, wow, we really are following somebody that was brutally executed, and who said, hey, if you want to follow me, your life is going to head into suffering as well. I'm going to show you how to walk through unbelievable suffering, okay? And that's what we're going to look at today. This text, a pastor I know, he said, instead of having like graphics in our worship services of like, hummingbirds sucking nectar out of flowers and stuff as a background to our worship slides, he's like the ushers seating people ought to have whips and flares, right? Because, this is intense. I mean, there's something about the Christian faith and what the person that we're following in Jesus that is like, wow, this is crazy. That's what we're looking at today, okay? So the crucifixion. Now, I never do this, okay? But I want to do something different today because, for me, I just feel like this text is a sacred text. We're reflecting on the center of our faith, the sacrifice of the Son of God, the suffering that He went through. I want to ask that we stand together for the reading of this text this morning. We're not one of these stand-up, sit-down churches. We don't do this often, but for some of us, I think that the crucifixion is just something we've heard so many times that it loses its power, all right? But I wanted to speak to us with power today. So we're in Mark 15, and we've just ended off last week with the soldiers are now leading Jesus out to be crucified. So He's on His way to be crucified, carrying the cross. And it says, verse 21, a certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. Then they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. and they crucified him. Dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The written notice of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." He crucified 2 rebels with him, one on his right, one on his left. And those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So, you who are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, come down from the cross and save yourself." The same way the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. "He saved others," they said, "but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down now from the cross that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also heaped insults on him. Jesus, we approach this text, this description of your suffering, of your sacrifice for us, God. We approach this text with honor given toward you, with worship, with awe for what you have endured, and with love for you, Jesus. I pray, God, that you might stir us and speak to our hearts today through the suffering that you endured. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. You can be seated. You know, this week, there's more to the text, to the story, but I broke the crucifixion into 2 parts. Next week, we're going to look at the second part, which is the death of Jesus. There is so much theologically about learning about what does that mean that Jesus actually died for our sins. We're going to look at that next week. And then the following week, by the way, Pastor David Parker is going to speak to us about the resurrection, all right? So you're going to want to be there for that. 2 weeks away. But this week, I'm taking just the first half of the crucifixion story where we're only right there focusing on the crucifixion itself, the suffering that Jesus endured, the mocking, the shaming that he went through, because I think that there's plenty here for us to kind of wrap our mind around and be stirred by. So in the beginning here, it starts off with saying that there's this guy named Simon that's he's just walking by, and they grab him and they go, "Hey, carry this cross for Jesus." Now, the way that the Romans did it is that the vertical beam of the cross would already be at the site where they're going to crucify him. Okay, so all that's being carried is the horizontal beam. And so, but what this story is telling us is something actually quite profound. The fact that Simon got, kind of coerced into carrying the cross. It wasn't because the guards who've just flogged Jesus, right, tortured him, whipped him, shredded his back. It's not that they're watching him carry the cross and going, oh, is that a little too heavy for you? Are you uncomfortable? Let me get somebody to carry that. They're not trying to make it more convenient for Jesus. The only thing that could possibly be going on, why they had to get somebody else to carry the cross, was because Jesus could no longer carry it. That Jesus was bumping up against the threshold of his strength, of his ability to physically carry this cross, because he was so weakened by the torture that they've just put him through, the flogging, the beating, the crown of thorns are pressing down into his head. He's losing so much blood, his muscles are shredded on his back because of the whip, and so he literally doesn't have the power any longer to carry a crossbeam to the site of his execution. Now, this is important because I think for so many of us, our view of Jesus, if we've come to a place of putting faith and trust in Jesus, I think the most natural thing that ends up happening is that we go, okay, I do believe Jesus is the Son of God. And then you sit with that for a little bit and you go, basically you just come to the place of going, Jesus is God. And we lose hold, I think, pretty easily of the side of it that he also was not only fully God, he was fully man. And there was an emptying that he did, that Philippians 2 talks about, that he kind of emptied himself of his God powers. And the way that he did stuff, he was relying on the power of the Holy Spirit. He was praying and moving in the power of the Spirit as he did ministry. But it wasn't because he was carrying around these God powers and he would just zap somebody, they'd be healed. No, he would pray that the Spirit of God would heal them and the Spirit of God would move. But I think so often we think of Jesus as like Superman. like he's God. So he's walking around, he's just doing, hey, when this text is showing us, he wasn't Superman. Don't think of like this ripped guy with abs and he's like, oh, give me that cross. Yeah, that's not what he's doing. He is bumping up against his threshold and his ability. He can no longer carry the cross. He needs help. That is communicating something about the humanity of Jesus. About the humanity of Jesus that's profound. This guy Simon carries the cross for him. And then they get to the site, and verse 23 says they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. A couple views on that. Maybe this is still part of, the Romans were mocking him they had just put a crown of thorns on him and a purple robe, and they're kind of mocking, oh, you're a king, we're going to bow down to you mockingly. This might be part of that. Oh, here's a wine mixed with myrrh, kind of this royal drink it. Maybe it's that. Other scholars read this and they go, well, that likely was kind of like a anesthetic. Might have been like that was going to help take the edge off of the crucifixion. So it's a little vague. It says they offered him. It kind of sounds like the guards. I can't imagine the guards are offering him an anesthetic because they think he might be uncomfortable, but it's a little vague about who it is. So anyway, there's two views about what that is. Either one. Jesus says no, okay? Either no, you're mocking me, or no, I don't want to take anything that's going to dull the pain. I want to head straight on into this. I've got a task to do, and I'm going to head straight into that suffering. So then, with just 4 words, Mark communicates something so gruesome. He says, and they crucified him. Not a lot of detail there. Mark is kind of famously succinct. And just gives us a little bit of detail, lots and lots of action going on through the Gospel of Mark, and not as much detail as some of the other Gospels. And so we come to the crucifixion like this moment, all he says is, and they crucified him. Now, he knows that the readers that he's writing to know what crucifixion looks like. I mean, the Romans, are occupying Israel, and the Romans, they didn't invent crucifixion, but they perfected it. They did it really, really well. And they did it a lot. The most conservative estimates, like the least amount that any scholar would say of the Romans that they crucified people, it's at least 30,000 people got crucified by the Romans. It's probably far, far higher of a number than that. So they have lots and lots of practice at this. And really there's like 3 main reasons why the Romans crucified people. So number 1, it's because of punishment. It's a way of kind of torturing somebody to punish them for doing something wrong. Prolonging, the whole idea of crucifixion is you're prolonging the death so someone has to suffer for as long as possible. So many people, it would take them days on end in order to kind of slowly die. Jesus, it only took 6 hours probably because of how badly they beat him beforehand and scourged him with this, whip with shards of glass and metal that just would shred your back down to the bone, is what they did to him before they crucified him. So Jesus only lasted from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. And also, the text says that he gave up his spirit. Right? So it's sort of like Jesus, they didn't take his life, he gave it, he laid it down. But the first primary purpose for the Romans of using crucifixion was punishment, right? Where I'm going to punish you for acting out in whatever way that you're not following the rules. The second one was shame and humiliation. This is a huge honor culture. Your name, your reputation, kind of how people see you is a big, 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 big deal in this culture. And so what better way to punish somebody than by shaming them and humiliating them? By hanging them up publicly on a cross for everybody to see them hanging there. And so that was a major reason why. And then the third reason was deterrence. This was a great way to convince people not to do crimes. because you would put the charge of the crime on the cross, and they would crucify people along major roadways. They'd put people up near gates coming into cities. It was the point was that lots and lots of people would see it and would look at it and go, wow, I don't want that to be me, so I'm going to follow the rules. So the Romans used this in a really effective way to try to get people, occupied territories to be in line and not to buck the system too much. So punishment, shame, humiliation, deterrence was kind of their reasons why. They crucified 30,000 people, and now they're crucifying Jesus. And this, by the way, is one of the just an absolute firm fact of history that Jesus was crucified, okay? Lots of scholars could then debate about the resurrection, about whether or not you think Jesus actually came back to life again. But no scholars are, no good scholars are honestly arguing over whether Jesus was a historical person and actually died by crucifixion. There is so much literature outside of the Bible. Roman historians and Jewish historians, people that are not followers of Jesus, that are writing in the next 100 years, that are referencing this guy, Jesus Christ, that had this following that was crucified under Pontius Pilate. It is like super well attested outside of the Bible, okay? Back in, when they did do crucifixions, one more small little note about crucifixions. The Romans, like the centurions, were given a lot of creative license, sadistic creative license about how they wanted to crucify people. And so generally speaking, the crucifixion would happen on a cross that looks like this one, maybe on the wall here with the two beams like that. But sometimes the cross beam would be right on top. So it'd be like a capital T looking cross. Sometimes they even made them like in the shape of an X, or sometimes it would only just be a pole or something. They can do them in different ways. Sometimes they tied arms or legs or different things. Sometimes there was a seat so you would last longer, sometimes not. There's all these different kind of methods of kind of crucifixion. But with Jesus, we do know that nails were used. In John's gospel, in chapter 20, there's this guy, Thomas, that's going, I don't believe that Jesus resurrected from the dead. Unless I can actually touch the nail marks in his hands, I'm not going to believe. And Jesus appears to him and he says, hey, touch the holes in my hands. Okay, so we know from John and this resurrection appearance of Jesus that nails were used in the crucifixion. And back just in the 1960s, north of Jerusalem, some archaeologists discovered the body of a young man in his mid to late 20s that was crucified just outside of Jerusalem around the same time that Jesus was crucified, okay, in the first few decades of the millennium. And so I want to show you a picture here. They recovered his bone with a nail actually in it. And so it's the picture that's on the right, that small little thing with that hideous nail going through it. The picture on the left is like a recreation, just to kind of show you that's the part of the foot that it is and where the nail is going through, because you can't tell that much from just looking at that piece of bone. But the piece of bone on the right is actually the thing that they've discovered, that they found. And I just want you to look at the size of that nail. That's what was put, and we're not just talking through flesh. We're talking about it goes through the bone in his foot, right, to nail him to the cross. Spikes like that through his hands. That's what's going on when it says, and they crucified him. Absolutely gruesome, absolutely horrific. So the next thing it says is, dividing up his clothes, they cast lots to see what each would get. You know what that means? Another normal practice here, part of the shaming. It means they stripped him naked and did this. Humiliating, right? Not only are you beaten and bloodied and hung up on a cross, suffering to die slowly in front of people that are just heading in to get groceries in town, but now you got to do it naked. I heard a pastor say this once, and I just thought, wow, in so many ways, we're going to talk about this in a second, that Jesus' suffering gives us this resource to know that he's actually endured some things when we have to endure some things. When we go through suffering, it's helpful to know that Jesus himself has actually been through it, that God understands something about suffering. But one thing I just hadn't really considered before is that even for those of us that maybe have endured some sort of sexual abuse in your life, Jesus went through sexual abuse. He was stripped naked and hung up on a cross for everyone to gawk at him. He went through that. He understands something of the pain that some of you might know all too well. It says that the written notice of the charge against him read King of the Jews. And so again, this is part of the deterrence. They put up this charge on the cross because it's way more effective if you know what this person did, rather than just like they crucified this guy. No, but if it says, hey, this guy, stole a loaf of bread, and you're going, okay, I'm never going to do that. Well, this charge that they're putting up against him was King of the Jews. Now, John's going to tell us that the guys, the Jewish guys that were leaning on Pontius Pilate to execute Jesus, the chief priests and teachers of the law and all those guys, they were mad about this, and they wanted it changed to say that he claimed to be the King of the Jews. But Pontius Pilate was like, what I've written, I've written. Because Pontius Pilate didn't really want to execute Jesus. He was being leaned on by these guys, and he just didn't have a backbone. He was like politically expedient. They did have power. They could make accusation that there was this guy claiming to be king, and that Pontius Pilate didn't do anything about it, and he'd get him in trouble with Caesar, his boss. And so that's why Pontius Pilate was like, okay, fine, I'll kill him. But Pontius Pilate put on there, King of the Jews. Which is ironic, right? Because that's exactly who he really is. That he is the king of the Jews, the king of the world. But he's hanging on a cross. So then we get to this point of mocking. Everyone starts to mock him and insult him. So it says, those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads, saying, so you are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days. Come down from the cross and save yourself. Come on, prove your words. Prove everything that you said by coming down off the cross. In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. He saved others, but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down from the cross that we may see and believe. Come down, Jesus. See, we'll believe in you if you perform, if you do it. Demonstrate that you're actually the king. Now, I think part of why this is here, okay, is not only that it just happened, but it's showing us something about ourselves. It's showing us something about, okay, number one, about how we as humans feel when the idea of God, the idea of being accountable to somebody else for our life, gets specific. It's way easier for the idea of God. Yeah, there's a God out there. And as long as it's general, and we can go, hey, you think God is blue, I think God is pink, who cares? As long as we each are, just have an idea of God or trying to, follow after God, cool, right? As long as it's general, we can make it fit whatever we want it to fit. But when God gets specific, when God shows up as a human being and says, I'm actually the Son of God, and I've got some things to say, we don't like that, right? Because now God is going to impose his ideas on us, that we don't just get to craft God into however we want him to be because he's so general we can just, make it be whoever we want. So God gets specific, and people don't like that. And then They're mocking him because they want him to perform and do it the way that they want him to. We want this story of God to end like a Marvel superhero movie, right? Where the superhero, it looks like all is lost and they're going to be killed and the whole universe is going to be destroyed. But then they rise up and they fight the bad guys and they kill everybody else and they save the day, right? That's what we want this story to be. That's what these guys want. They're going, come on. If you get yourself down off that cross, we'll believe you. Oh, you can't? Oh. They're mocking him because Jesus isn't performing for them, isn't doing what he's supposed to be doing. I think this happens when life gets tough, when things get messy in our lives, when we go, God, if you're real, do this. We want God to perform for us. There's something in the human heart that this story is pointing out, that is exposing. But here's the major question that I've been kind of wrestling with, all right? It is why the suffering, the shaming, the mocking of Jesus. Why is all of that such a big part of this story? And it wasn't just that Jesus died, okay? Because we're going to look at that next week, the death of Jesus. What if Jesus just, had his head chopped off or something like just quick, like no suffering, just took a bunch of pills and never woke up again. Whatever it is, so he would do the death part, but not the suffering part. Why is there so much suffering? Why is there so much mocking and shaming and humiliation and all of this? Is it just that it was the Roman times and that's how it went down? Or is there something to the story that is communicating to us, that's important for us to understand, that's important about Jesus having to suffer? See, the way that the Gospel of Mark tells a story, and really all the Gospels, they're telling us the story of Jesus. They're not filling in a lot of the kind of ideas about why this is in the background, what's going on, okay? So later parts of the New Testament, guys like Paul are going to start to fill in the dots and go, here's what the sacrifice and the death of Jesus means for you. Here's why that happened, okay? Jesus isn't so much saying that right now. The Gospel of Mark isn't going, he's going to die for you to make atonement for your sins. Like that's not what the Gospel of Mark is doing here, okay? So we have to go to a few different places in Scriptures to really wrap our minds around what is happening here. Why is this so meaningful? Why is he going through this? So with the suffering, what I want to do is not just go forward into other parts of the New Testament. I want to go backward, because Jesus is constantly referencing the Old Testament in regard to himself, his life, his ministry, how he's fulfilling it, right? Well, backward in the prophet Isaiah, there is, in chapter 53, there is this prophetic kind of psalm called the suffering servant song, okay? So this is all about this future person who would be this righteous person who would not have any beauty or majesty to attract us to him, but who would suffer and take on the sins of others and pay for that. And so it's very clearly a pointer to the Messiah, a pointer ahead to the future coming person of Jesus. And in that text of Isaiah, he is, having trouble here. There's a couple of really interesting verses. So the first of which is can we put that up on the screen? I'll read it that way. That in verse 10, there's this line that talks about this suffering servant, that it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. So Isaiah is like really clearly saying, okay, there's something about the fact that Jesus was beaten, that isn't just like that he happened to fall into the hands of the Romans and that's what they did. But actually, there's something about the suffering that he did that was the will of God causing that to happen. Okay? So then we've got to then go, well, why? Well, what's the deal about Jesus having to suffer so much? Why did God's will cause him to suffer? There's a couple other indicators in Isaiah 53 about this suffering servant. Okay, the first of which is this. In verse 4, the text says, "Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted." So this is telling us that Jesus took up not just his own suffering, he actually took up our suffering. He actually bore our pain, right? That there's something about that he's taking on. He's entering into our pain and taking it on himself. Now I think there's a dimension of that means when we are suffering, when we're in pain, that we're not alone, that God understands. And I tell you this is helpful if you're in the throes of the kind of pain that's overwhelming you. Not just the kind of pain like, Starbucks was out of soy milk today. My day is ruined. I'm talking about the kind of suffering where you have like my life before that happened and my life after. Like something is so dramatically different. If the loss of a child, something that's just there's just never, life is never going to be the same. You're thrown into a suffering. I tell you, when you get into those kind of situations, it helps to know that God has felt suffering, that he himself has entered into our pain and our suffering, that he isn't just, out there in the heavens somewhere enjoying himself at the heavenly resort while we're down here suffering, that he actually has borne our pain, that he's walked through it with us. And then in the next verse 5 of Isaiah 53, it says, "But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed." This is telling us something about, that it's not just that he's taking on our pain, but there's a reason why we have caused that pain, right? That because of our iniquity, our sin, Jesus is punished. There's something about punishment that is part of the fabric, the nature of justice, right? That if someone does some heinous act against you or your family, something terrible, they murder somebody in your family, the justice system is going to absolutely want to go, okay, if we stick them in jail or we, whatever, some form of rehabilitation is a part of what the kind of the intent and the purpose of the justice system is designed to do. But that's not all. The only question driving, someone that is found guilty of murder is not, well, how do we rehabilitate him? It's also that kind of action demands some punishment. Something needs to go hard and rough in your life for a while. We don't want to put you up in a hotel with room service for the next 20 years and you can come and go as you want. We're going to put you in prison where the food's not great. Because we want you to actually feel something, to have your movements constricted. Because there's something about punishment that goes with doing really, really terrible things. And if a family experienced someone murdering their family member, and then they're at the trial, and this person is convicted, and the judge goes, 5 years community service. I think that'll rehabilitate you so you don't do this again. The family would not feel that justice had been served, right? There would be a gape, there just would be Like, no, this person needs to be punished, right? Well, listen, you and I have done something, what this is communicating to us, what the horrific suffering of Jesus spikes through the bone of his heel after his back has been shredded and he's hung naked. That's actually communicating something about what you and I have done. I recognize we don't think like that in modern America. We don't walk around going, man, I am as bad as a murderer. I'm just so terrible. I know that we've lost our moral conscience. We no longer feel about ourselves the way that God feels about us, right? The way that God sees what our actions and our rebelliousness and all that produces in our lives. We think we're fine. But that's why we need to come back to this text. We need to come back to this story, and we need to wrestle with, why did Jesus have to suffer so much? It's because he took on the punishment that was due us for our sin. And friends, if you never wrap your mind around, if you never come to a place of understanding that the things that you've done against God deserved punishment, you're not ever going to understand the depth of God's love and grace. You're going to have this kind of surface level veneer, yeah, cool, I like God, he's good, he's done some cool stuff. You're never going to really get what this thing is about. And you probably won't really be changed by the Spirit of God on the inside unless we come to really recognizing what Jesus has done for us and our incredible need for Jesus to have gone through this for us. So next week, we're going to look at the second part of this, right? The meaning of why Jesus had to die. But I wanted this week to make sure that we're understanding that it's not only about death, that the cross is speaking something to us about the suffering that Jesus endured because of what you and I have done. And I want to invite us to stand, and I want to pray that God's Spirit might stir something deep inside of us about the reality of this truth. Might bring a sense of the kind of knowing that isn't in our mind but is in our heart. So let's take just a moment and pray together. Jesus, I ask that this text, this story about you would come alive inside of us, would be stamped and imprinted deeply on our soul. I pray, God, that we would get a greater understanding inside of the darkness and the depth of our sin, so that we might have a greater understanding of your love and your goodness and your grace that is poured out on us for free. But we know that it wasn't free for you. We know that it cost you, that you paid a tremendous penalty for the things that we've done. And so I pray, God, that there would be a desire inside of us to please you, to obey you, to follow after you, to say yes to you in our life. Pray there would be an inward shift of falling so in love with Jesus that our passion and our love for you and our pursuit of you would become even greater than our passion for the things of the world, of our pursuit of all of the things that we chase after. God, may your cross draw us to your heart. Thank you, Jesus, for what you've endured for us.